Nigeria's state governors want the House of Representatives to drop the controversial Control of Infectious Diseases Bill, pending adequate and wide consultations. Well, the bill, sponsored by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, has been criticized as being draconian and unfit for a democratic Nigeria. Chairman of the Governors Forum, Governor Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti State, said until there is an appropriate consultative process, the bill should be stepped down. Joining us in the studio to discuss this is a legal practitioner and public commentator, LIBOROUS OSHOMA. LIBOROUS, good morning. Glad to have you join us.
Good morning.
Great. Now, there are various criticisms against this bill, ranging from this is not the time to allegations that the bill is a sinister attempt to turn Nigerians into guinea pigs for medical research, and at the same time taking away fundamental human rights. For you as a lawyer who has definitely read the bill, what are the real contending issues? That is, if really there should be any contending issues aside maybe trust issues?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. There are so many contending issues in the bill that makes it unfit for a democratic environment such as ours, and then also especially against the backdrop that you have so many sections in the bill that are contrary to the provisions of the Constitution, and we all know that by virtue of Section 3, Section 1, subsection 3 of the Constitution, most of those sections becomes void. Take, for example, from Section 15, Section 20, Section 25, and also, I think, Section 77 of that bill are obnoxious and contrary to public policies. A bill that empowers the police or members of the Center for Disease Control to arrest without warrant if in their opinion they feel or they have reasonable suspicion that somebody has an infectious disease. It's not a bill fit for our democracy. And then, if you remember, like we all know, this bill was copied. It's a plagiarized piece of document from Singapore. Is in 1977 Singaporean Infectious Disease Act. And you also know that as at that time, Singapore operated a one-party state and with a totalitarian government. So, you know, going back to 1977 to copy a piece of document that even the Singaporean government had updated and then dump it on Nigerian, for me, I think it's a disservice to the nation.
Well, before Adefemi comes in, the Speaker has already said that in lawmaking, there's not like plagiarism. I mean, you can take a law and then reform it and adopt it, you know, to what is good for your country. That's what he said.
Yeah, you can take a law and reform and adopt. But I can tell you that in this law, in this piece of document, the one for Singapore is about 43 pages. This one is 44 pages. What we basically did was, in the place of Singapore, we tipped Singapore and put Nigeria there. There's no reformation, not at all. There is no adaptation also. And so that is why this is not a law you copied and reform to suit or to adapt to your local environment. What we basically did is a lazy piece of work. I think the drafters ought to have done far better than this. So I cannot excuse the Speaker for saying that you can take a law and reform. What they did with this, they didn't even reform at all. They copied hook, line, and sinker. And what just happened is where you have, like I said, where you have Singapore, they tipest and put Nigeria. So that cannot fit into what the Speaker himself is describing.
Let's move away from the proposed similarities between the two bills. If we were to look at the content of it, is there anything that you agree with? Are there any parts of this bill that you are in support of? Because at its purest form, if we are currently fighting a major pandemic from a virus that we know to be deadly, surely there is some basis, there is some grounds to say that if healthcare professionals believe a person poses a threat to the public by not willingly coming to isolate themselves or turn them over to healthcare authorities, they should be taken off the streets by force. Do you think that there's any legal or any moral support for that? Or do you think in its entirety this bill is a bad thing for Nigeria?
First and foremost, we need to understand that we are coming from a backdrop of opposition to the hate speech bill. And then what's the other bill again that was the social media bill. And so if you look at the social media and the hate speech bill and then you place it side by side with this current bill, they are almost similar in nature. Yes, it is good for us to take out people with infectious diseases, but let's also adapt it to our local environment. We have people with leprosy, for example, and we have leprosy camp. How well have we treated those camps that we keep leprosy people? That to the extent that now you have a lot of them on the road because government have been unable to fend for them. Also, we had, just before the COVID-19, we had a Lassa fever outbreak. How well were we catering for people with Lassa fever so as to not spread the disease? Apart from Lagos State, I can't remember any other state, including most states in the northern region, who took out time to cater for people with Lassa fever. It's because this COVID-19 is no respecter of person. That's why you see all of them running helter-skelter. And so we need to have a situation where you'd clearly define what these infectious diseases are, the care that the government owe the people, and then who should be qualified to be a director general of the Infectious Disease Center. A situation where you have somebody who is not a medical personnel, who is a political appointee and is appointed there, he does not know anything about infectious diseases. He can use that same act to fight passive political opponent because the act empowers the DG. It may almost makes him a dictator. You have no resort to court. What if, in the opinion of if the DG commits an offense or any act carried out by the DG or his subordinates, you can only apply to the minister for a review, and that is all. You can't even go to court. The court has no power to question him. So that's why a lot of people are looking at the issue of the act and looking at all of these sections, how you can expunge them. Our attitude is the government attitude to these people is very key in applying this bill. We're also talking about poverty. In the entire gamut of the bill, the government also has not provided, you're talking about infectious diseases control, the government had not provided situations where government can be responsible to people that they have quarantine. A situation also where you have the power to declare any place isolation center. You come to my house and declare it in the word of the DG, declares it as isolation center. The bill is lacking in merit in what the Center for Disease Control or the people that they also have presumed or perceived to have infectious disease. That's why it's very bad.
Right, let me come in there. Well, the Speaker, Bajabiya Mila, of the House says there will be a 2-day public hearing on this bill. Let me quote him, directly here. The bill that will be passed by the House will be the aggregate of the submissions of Nigerians. This were his words. Liberals, should this not simply end the hue and cry over this bill? If there's going to be a public hearing where people like you will submit memoranda and others will also be part of whatever you want change in the bill?
Andy, we know the way public hearings are conducted in Nigeria, even on normal circumstances, where even the public will oppose. Remember, I talked about the social media bill. You hear the promoter of the bill at the House insisting that in spite of the hue and cry, in spite of the opposition, insisting that the bill must see the light of the day. Not to talk of a situation where you can't even have, a normal, public hearing. So it's just going to be a virtual public hearing where most of the opposition voices, can be muted. And so when that happens, and because trust is a key issue in lawmaking, the way and manner the bill was first and foremost smuggled into the House of Rep caused to question the trust of the proponent of the bill and the fact that they might not allow, even no matter the voices, they say the voice of the people is the voice of God. The voices against the bill, even from the governor, is a not public hearing for the House to know that, look, this bill had been defeated, or that they need to go back and do a thorough homework. But now wanting to do this grandstanding, oh yes, we must go for public hearing. For me, I think there is more to that public hearing than meet the eye, where some of us might not even be opportune to have a say, even if the public hearing is actually going to be public.
But he has said you will get the opportunity, you know. Anyway, Femi wants to comment.
Thank you, indeed. I mean, the Federal High Court in Abuja, we know that they have ordered a halting of the passing of this infectious disease bill, and that's in relation to the former Kogi West Senator Dino Melaye putting in some type of, I don't want to call it a lawsuit, but he did file a suit against the National Assembly. If we were to take a few steps back and look at this new proposed bill, what exactly is the problem with it? Can we go over the content? Is it the penalties associated with it? Is it the elevated powers the DG would have? If we were to highlight a few points for why there is so much disdain towards it, I think that would go a long way to enabling our viewers to understand in its totality what the issue is here. So if you could do that.
Let's look at Section 7 and Section 12. Looking at Section 7 and 12 of the bill, it's a good clause where the DG of the NCDC can order an autopsy of anybody who he presumed to have died of an infectious disease. Fantastic, but that's the end to the good part of the bill. Section 15, subsection 3 says that the DG can take any reasonable action, which in his opinion to give effect to order that he has made. Any reasonable action nowhere defined in the bill. Section 15, the DG can declare any premises whatsoever, including yours and mine, an isolation center. So it contradicts sections of the Constitution that empowers me to have movable and immovable property. Section 20, the DG, in his opinion, can disallow any meeting if, in his opinion, he thinks that meeting will further spread an infectious disease. Also not well clearly defined. Section 24, the police can arrest without warrant. And mind you, arrest without warrant appeared 14 times in the 44 page of the document. Police can, without warrant, arrest on grounds of suspicion alone. They do not even have to prove. And if they arrest without warrant, you do not have the power to question such arrest in court. Section 55, that the DG can search any premises without warrant, if in his opinion he feels and have reasonable suspicion that people with infectious diseases are living in that place.
Fantastic.
Section 58. Also, you can arrest without warrant on grounds of suspicion. And Section 17(1), the DG cannot be held, or his team members cannot be held accountable. I can go on and on. As a journalist, sorry, last one. As a journalist, if you provide information that the DG feels is detrimental to the running of the organization, you can't be arrested without warrant. This is not a bill for a democratic environment.
Fantastic, Liberous, fantastic. But these are the things that you can, collate and bring before the public hearing, except the trust issues. All right,
Andy, this is a public hearing. You and I are conducting a public hearing on this bill now.
We're going. No, this one is not. I mean, the speaker has talked about the real public hearing. I mean, the one that they will hold.
This is even better, because this can even go further than the one they conduct there.
Fantastic. That's why I said fantastic. You're mastering out your points. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at some very key issues. The fact that there's a claim that it wouldn't stand, the quarantine bill won't stand judicial, inquiry. But we'll be back and we'll continue with LIBOROUS OSHOMA while we stopped. Stay with us. We still have public commentator LIBOROUS OSHOMA on the morning show been discussing the control of infectious diseases bill that the House of Representatives has passed second reading there. I mean, there was talk that it was too quick.
Right.
It passed too quick. And of course, it has a sister in the Senate, Otazi, also is bringing up. Liberous, you're still there. Now, the Speaker posits that our current framework for the prevention and management of infectious diseases is obsolete and no longer fit for purpose. Isn't it stating the obvious reason why the House wants to replace the Quarantine Act with this bill? And then add to that, what's your sense of the statement that the government is vulnerable to claims, that some directives already being implemented by the government may not withstand judicial scrutiny?
I agree that there's need to update the current Quarantine Act of 1920-something. It's an old piece of legislation and it needs, updating. But the problem is that you don't update a piece of legislation by replacing it with an obnoxious one. Even if, like I said earlier, if you are going to copy and adopt a law, it must, be adopted to suit your local environment. And then also, it must also be able to win the trust of your people. A situation where you are amending an old law, and then you bring an entirely new one, and most of the clauses in the new one are alien to the old one, then you have a problem. That's where the big problem that we have. And then I agree with you that some of these clauses that the government is currently implementing might go through judicial scrutiny. But we all know that we're in a war situation. This is it's a global war that we are facing, really. And I am not one to be too legalistic on issues. The steps that government had taken so far are not steps that, to a very large extent had infringed on fundamental rights of people, except like the issue you discussed before, where police were seen, or military personnel were seen hounding people and enforcing lockdown orders with impunity. But that action, is covered, it's not covered by the Quarantine Act. It is covered by the Police Act and the Armed Forces Act. So all of these are powers that the Police Act and the Armed Forces Act, have taken care of and that are implemented. And so if they go beyond the powers spelled out in the law enabling them, then you can begin to question such powers. And then also talking about the issue of lockdown, some people also have said that not being the president had no such powers, and that governors have no such powers if they do not adopt the Quarantine Act. And basically, what must government have done? We also know that by virtue of the Constitution, the president has the power to declare state of emergency, which surreptitiously the government has done. And so I still do not see where also that conflict with existing powers. Secondly, what most of the state governors have done is to adopt the Quarantine Act by regulation, executive orders, because of the inability of the State Houses of Assembly to sit and pass such laws. And so where executive orders have been adopted, we also know that executive order, no matter how well intended, cannot take the place of law. But it's a framework, it's a regulation and a framework that government can work with, pending where the House of Assembly is able to adopt these executive orders that have been so made. So it is not as if there is there is so much lack of framework for us to cater for the present situation that we are in now. It is good, like I said, for us to update where we find ourselves. But what we are updating it's a very bad piece of document. And then, lastly, on this point, is the fact that there's need for also to look at, because poverty is a big viral disease, worse than COVID-19 in Nigeria. There's also need for government, because there are so many things that if we had taken steps to do, as at the time we needed to do them, we won't even be bothering ourselves with all of the laws that we're making out. Take, for example, please permit me, the CJN recently issued directive to all the states' high court judges to decongest prisons. And all of these are regulations provided for in the state laws. If we had taken steps to, prosecute criminal cases timeously, our prisons would have been congested, and there would be no need decongesting them now by hook or by crook. And so when you look at hunger in the land, there's need for us also, any law that does not address the hunger in the land, no matter how well intended, you're going to suffer backlash. A situation where you tell people to sit back at home and they do not have home to sit in. A situation where 56% of your population do not have access to clean water. A situation where more than 59% of your population live below less than $1 a day. A situation where even the government admitted that about 83 million Nigerians are poor. And so if you do not have laws that will address all of this poverty and hunger, no matter how well intended your infectious disease is, hunger is more infectious. And if you address hunger and education, most of these issues, you will not need to begin to legislate on them because they will automatically address themselves.
So then, acknowledging what you've just said, the current Quarantine Act in Nigeria, in addition to the Infectious Diseases Bill also in Nigeria that we have currently, do you not think that they need to be updated? Or do you think that in their natural form, how they are now is good enough? I just want to understand.
I already said it, that the Quarantine Act needs updating. Okay. That there's need for you to update it. But in updating it, it has to be updated, one, in tandem with the existing law, in tandem with the existing reality, and adapt to suit your local environment. Anything short of that, you'll just be calling for trouble.
All right, Liborous, it said that you don't throw away the baby or the bathed water.
Yeah.
All right, what would you want to see taking out of this this bill, adjusted or included?
I already reeled out, some of those sections for you. But if you want me to reel them out again, I can quickly do that.
No, you talked about
those sections. Those sections I read out. You need to expunge them completely, and then in some cases amend some of the words used. Every bill should have a clear-cut definition of the provisions of the law, and so a situation where you say, in the opinion of the DG. You can't leave that to the dictate. We're talking about the irresponsibility of discretion on the part of security agencies. And then you are giving them unfettered power. Also, what should be included in the bill, and the fact that nobody has powers to query the discretion of the DG also, it should be amended. Take, for example, the lady's case in Benue State.
Yeah.
The lady that was... The Igboko that was quarantined, and she's been crying it's almost as if she's been detained without her consent.
Actually, I'm not cutting you short, but she's actually, the lawyer was talking yesterday and says, we want to go to court and enforce my fundamental human rights. But part of it, the health minister said, was also her issue. She wanted WHO to do the second testing and take it to London or something. But the health minister says that she's been convinced to do the test here in Nigeria, but are still going ahead and want to go to court and enforce her rights.
Issues like that. We're already battling with issues like that, even despite the fact that that law is not in place. So if you now implement or pass such a law, I'm telling you that a woman like that and so many others, including you and I, can just forget their freedom. So also there's need to give people opinion, a second opinion. I should have a right to a second opinion of my choice. If as an accused person, you have a right to a legal representation of your choice. In the same vein, if the government says I have infectious disease, I should also have a right of a second opinion of my choice. It shouldn't be left to the dictate and whims and caprices of a director general. So these are some of the issues. And then lastly, I talked about hunger and poverty. The bill should address that elaborately, and also so that you'll be able to... I don't like the fact that we keep reacting instead of being proactive. You can address what breeds diseases. You can address environmental issues even in the bill, and ensure that government provide the basic environment for the people. And so when you provide the basic environment, take Morocco, for example, and take Ilaje. What stops? We have If you travel to some of these, countries that borders, the ocean, you have similar structures, but beautiful and well-refined environment. So if an environment like that, if you do not take care of such environment, where people openly defecate in rivers, and yet, in year 2020, we're still talking about how to curb open defecation. So these are some of the issues that breed infectious diseases. If the bill does not take care of all of those things and place a heavy responsibility on government, whose duty is the welfare and security of the people, security can be expanded to mean you secure me that I shouldn't even be sick. If you do not take care of all of these issues, then you have a long thing coming, because you'll just be reacting.
A long thing coming indeed.
There we go. I mean, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the chances are of this bill becoming law? Do you think it will go the entire way? Do you think the public hearing will come to pass and do its job? Or do you think that we are elongating a process that is inevitably going to be the case?
I'll borrow from your words. We're elongating a process that will inevitably, be dead on arrival. Because even if this bill, because I see the speaker defending it vociferously, and even though his defense cannot be said a defense properly so-called, because we talked about a plagiarized document. He said, yes, you can copy, but you copy, you refuse to adapt. And so, even if the bill sees the light of the day and they force their way through, I can tell you for sure that we are going to spend money to ensure that the bill is defeated. Most of these sections are defeated in court, because we've seen situations where even the Electoral Act that seems to oust the powers of the court or take away the discretion of the judge, we've seen the judges at the Federal High Court restore such discretion and expunge such powers. So why bother? Like I said at ND, this is akin to a public hearing, and vox populi, voice Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. And if the people have spoken, including governors, then they should take it as public hearing and amend the sections of the bill that people are angry with.
Thank you so much. Interesting discussion with you, LIBOROUS OSHOMA, there, a lawyer.